I know that some of you have seen propagation before, but it's never something you can't learn something else new every time. And there's a lot of people that's been asking me to do it, so I said, why not? So hopefully everybody can learn something tonight. And I'm not going to do air layering. I usually do that. This time, half hour doesn't give me enough time to go through all the ways of propagating, but we'll cover most everything. And first and easiest, and if you have native plants, I know that a lot of you, I know Gail does, I know Donna probably does it. We all have little stray little plants that come up where we don't want them to come up. And I hate to weed them. If you've ever been to the garden cleanup, I call them the adoptees, and you get to take little plants home all the time. Yep. So, and one time we loaded up Cindy's whole trunk. So it's a good thing. So they're being adopted out, and if you can, I get them up all, especially Coreopsis, red sage, gaillardia. Now my golden rods are going into the driveway, so I got to keep moving them back. So transplanting seedlings, you can go out and just grab them and rip them up out of the ground, but I don't suggest doing that. Plants pick up water and nutrients from the ground through their roots. And the part of the roots that do that is the very tips of the roots, where you'll see little hairs on the very tip, and the tip is called meristem. Meristem is constantly dividing cells and developing new root growth. And as it moves along, it hardens off and becomes the root xylem, or the root wood. So when you go in and just rip it out, you're literally ripping those tips off. So the transplanting is a little bit harder to do. They will transplant, but they've got to put out new tips and new hair roots. They'll do it pretty rapidly, 1 to 2 weeks, but you're stressing them out in the meantime. So whenever I see one, I go out with either a trowel, or I use this because I get a bigger root zone, and this is a pretty sturdy scoop. And I just go around the plant. We'll pretend that this Coreopsis is in the ground. All you do is you go down, we go back a little bit, keep moving around on the soil, okay, until you get all the way around, and then gently lift it. A little hard to do with the pot edge, but lift it up out of the ground. Leave as much soil on it as you can, but for this purpose tonight, I'm going to take this soil off, because there's all roots in that soil where it's rooted out into the ground. So you don't really want to disturb it much, but I want you to see the root zone. How long have these been in the pot, Gail? Do you know?
Spring.
Spring?
Since the spring.
And you can see all the little roots all around here. Well, that's the same thing. Now, if you live in a sand hill and you do this, it's not going to come up this nicely because the sand falls off. So it's better to transplant your little plants after a rain. If all the soil falls off the roots, don't worry about it. You want to look at your roots. Now these I would call downward roots, where the roots come out and go down into the soil. We have some that have lateral rooting. And this is one of them. This is a skull cap. Oh, my flower, no, there's my flower. Has a pretty little bloom, little spike bloom. These were all open. Skull cap is a native, but the roots come out and run horizontally and then downward. So when you're transplanting, I'll get into that in a minute. Also, the petunia, this is our native petunia, has roots that go horizontal, then down. Okay? Same thing with the obedient plant. They have rhizome or stolons that grow under the ground, and this is going to become another plant. So they spread by stolons, also by seed, but they put their root system out, they put the stolon down, they go over here, and it comes up with another plant. So these are all considered lateral rooting. On lateral rooting, when you're going to put it in a pot, and you're going to put these into pots, you can transplant them into the ground, but they're going to take a longer time to be happy again. So what you do with horizontal ones is you leave your soil level, you set your plant in gently into the pot, and you add soil to the top of the pot. Not a whole lot. You don't want to bury your plant any deeper than it was ever buried in the ground, okay? Firm it up with your fingers. Make sure your soil's wet. Make sure the plants are wet. So if you do it after rain, if you don't do it after rain, sit them in a bucket until you get ready to put them into the pots. They're going to stay happier that way. The roots don't dry out because the hair roots will be the first thing to dry off very quickly. Once you get it into the pot, you're going to leave it in the pot anywhere from, it depends on the plant itself. Some of them are more vigorous, but I'd say at least 2 months before you transplant it into a ground, or you can put it in a bigger pot, or put it in a pollinating pot where you have a plant that died off. You can add a plant to that. Okay, so that's with roots that go like this. Now roots that come out and go down, let's say this didn't have all this soil on. You want your roots to dangle down, okay? But you don't want to cram them in there so they're sitting on top of each other. So what you do in that case is you make a mound in the center of the pot, spread the roots around that mound, okay? So you're going to put the roots so that the soil's going up into the center of that root ball. So there's no air pocket. Air pockets is like cancer to a plant. If it has an air pocket and it stays dry, it will dry out and eventually kill the plant very, very, very slowly. So you want to make sure there's no air pocket there. So you want to put that little bit of soil underneath the roots, tuck the roots gently around that mound, and then add soil on top of it until it's back to where it was when you pulled it up out of the ground. Okay? So you just firm it in with your fingers, water it well. Again, these are ones that go outward, so you want your soil flat. Set them in, add the soil around the edge. Until you have them, and sometimes you may have to stake them. I don't generally stake mine, but it depends on how big they are. Now you can, what I suggest doing, what I do, is I would cut these flowers off because a plant has a source for its energy. It's called a source sink, and it sinks that energy from the root zone to whether it's putting out flowers, whether it's putting out fruit, whether it's putting out new growth. You want it to put out new roots. So you want to take this off so it doesn't feed these flowers, because the flower is going to take priority over the roots, and if the roots don't get enough attention, they're not going to root in very well. So I would go ahead and cut these back. Just take the flower right off where the seed heads like this one has, and that's what you would have. It would transplant much, much better because now it doesn't have to carry all that juice up to the flowers. It can put out new roots and still heal these cuts. On something like this, they're usually very vigorous, so they're not going to have a problem. Come here, baby. I'm going to go ahead and add your brothers to you. Let's do that again. I had a Master Gardener Appreciation dinner this morning, so I went into the garden and got some of the adoptees. So there won't be missing a few adoptees next time we go to the garden. And then just add the soil to the top of that. Firming them up. But don't bury them too deep, because also when you bury a plant too deep up onto the trunk, people do this with trees all the time. They bury that root zone. If you put 2 inches on and put the root ball 2 inches under the ground, it's too much. In a year's time, you're going to start seeing damage on that plant. So you want to see the root zone when you plant it. There's root zone, top of your root zone from the pot, same level as the soil. If you bury them too deep, they're going to suffocate. Roots have to breathe. They have to have an oxygen exchange. So a lot of people make that mistake. I made that mistake for many, many years until I worked at Disney World for 7 years and planted 5,000 million plants every day. Okay, so we got Coreopsis, we got the obedient, whoops, another obedient plant? How did you get up here? Get in there. I think these were in the walkway, so I took them all.
What are those, Barbara?
Obedient plant. It has a beautiful purple spike, and supposedly you can take those spikes and direct them in a direction and they're going to stay. They're going to be obedient to you. Mine don't seem to do that. I think they're disobedient plants. So anyway, you would transplant those, and this is the petunia. Again, it has lateral roots, so you want to make sure that the roots, and don't do this and the roots stick up like this. They're going to dry out. This is where they feed from, so that's not going to work. So just kind of tuck them a little bit, gently, and then plop some soil down on top of them. Very easy, and you can get so many plants from your own yard and not have to pay $5 a plant or more. And if you get too many, you can always bring them in for the plant table. All right. And don't do that.
Barbara's bloopers.
We may need the broom later, Julio.
I can tell.
I try to not to make a mess, but I'm kind of a messy person. Okay, now. Okay, so now that didn't take very long, and it would have taken me probably 10 more minutes to go around the yard and pick them up. So about 20 minutes, you can have a handful of new plants ready to go, okay? So that's transplanting seedlings. Now, if you do cuttings, you transplant them the same way, but you have to root them now. So what you want to do is have some sort of tray with wet soil. You can use something called a root hormone, which a plant normally produces itself. And that hormone, it's a powder that you can buy. You tuck the end of your tip in and you stick it in the soil, and it sort of increases or decreases the time, but increases the amount of roots that develop. So you can use that, but I never have time to do that. So I just do my cuttings like normal. Oops, darn, I have more seedlings. These are coffee plants. Some people have some coffee plants that they got from me, and I brought them a lot.
They're going to turn into a nice hedge.
Hmm?
They're going to turn into a nice hedge.
Good. And they like to be cut. You can see these have roots that go down, so what you want to do with this type is get your pot of soil then you're going to make a hole. I thought I had a dip, but I must have lost it. Anyway, you can use your finger. Just push the soil back all the way around, set it in, make sure your level is where you want it, and just push the soil back in and firm it around the roots. You don't have to be that gingerly because these things are like weeds. So you would do those like that. You can see how they start and they go straight down. They have a taproot. That's considered a taproot. When the roots go to the side, those are lateral roots. When they go all the way around, those are fibrous roots. And that all tells you how to propagate. It tells you what you should do when you propagate them. Okay? Then we're going to do, just had 4 minutes, so I want to make sure it's right, I don't spill it. Yes, Kay, I can't see behind the table.
How do you decide what size pot, as far as depth, width? I mean,
Well, if you're just taking out seedlings like this, a 4-inch pot is great. If you put a plant in a pot too big, it actually slows down the development of the root zone because it's too far to go. This way it's going to go to the edge of the pot or to the bottom of the pot, then it's going to start putting out lateral roots with more filler feeding hairs on it to take up more nutrients and water. But if you get it into you take a pot like this, fully rooted, and you put it into a pot like this, without other plants in it to take up that zone, it's going to put roots out straight down or straight out, and it's going to keep going until it hits something. In nature, it hits another root, or it hits another plant, or it hits a rock, and then it develops there. If you see plants that live on the side of a cliff, especially like cedars and stuff, they have a very little root zone. They have nowhere to go, but they made it because they wanted to live. So don't give them that big root zone, but give them enough zone for them to develop roots. Now, if you weren't going to put these right into the room, into the garden, then you could just put it into another pot, but I wouldn't go higher than the 1 gallon pot, which is what most of those plants are in back there, or some of them, not all of them. And then from that 1 gallon to a 3 gallon, 3 gallon to a 7. If you're gonna keep going in pot size, that's how they do them in the nursery. They start everything out in a 1. Unless they're doing annuals, they start out in a 4, and these are considered 4-inch. Okay, so then you're gonna do cuttings. The most important thing about cuttings is get your cuttings fresh. Don't do them the day before and stick them in their soil tomorrow. And when you get them, either put them in something with moisture. They don't have to be sitting in water, but they do have to be moist, because now they have no attachment to the root. So now they're gonna absorb water through their leaves. And that's why we water our cuttings. So you take these down. This is considered, where a leaf comes out is considered a node, okay? At the nodes is where you're gonna develop roots. So you're gonna look at the bottom, take off all but a couple leaves. That's gonna be absorbing your water. And then you have nodes, inner node, node, inner node, node, inner node. You do not want an inner node on the bottom, because it has nowhere to develop a root, so it will rot. And if it rots, it can damage your roots when they come out. So you want to cut just below that node. Can you pass that one around? I'll pass that one around while I do another one. This is a mulberry that you're looking at there. Also, when you're doing cuttings, you don't want wimpy tops. Wimpy tops will never get enough moisture to develop. They'll dry up, and then you'll have dead up here, and then you have a chance of disease. So you want to get rid of all the wimpy tops. And or flowers, or wimpy means that it's too flexible, floppy. So this would not be a good place to start your cutting. Your first cutting would be down here. But we're gonna do this wax myrtle first. Okay, I took the tops off, so it doesn't have any more wimpiness to it. Then you wanna take out the larger of the leaves.
Can you just cut them in half?
What's that?
Cut the
You
leaves
can
in
cut the leaves in half, but it's also creating a wound. I don't do that except for on something like, I will be doing that on the sea grape. So you take off the bigger leaves, because it still has to develop roots, and with all this leaf matter on top, it's going to be trying to feed those and keep them from drying out. So then you have something like this. Find a node. Some of them are a lot easier to see, some of them aren't. You want your cuttings to be 3 to 4 inches, not bigger than that, because they're going to fall over. So find a node at a good place, cut it. If you're going to use the root tone, you stick it in the root tone now. I don't suggest sticking your cuttings into the jar of root tone. Put that root tone out into a saucer or something, and you can dip it in there. Some people will make a slurry, mixing the powder with water and kind of get like a batter on the bottom. You can do that, but it is not necessary. When you stick it, you want to make sure you have 1 to 2 nodes below the surface. And then firm them up in there. So that's our wax myrtle. This is I believe it's a privet. This one, the leaves, they're all sort of small, so you don't have to worry about that. Just strip the bottom, and they should come right off. Strip that off. Find a node area, cut below the node, and stick it in. Now, what I normally do on plants like this is I generally do it in a 4-inch pot. So I will take a couple cuttings and do what I call 3-in-1. So you angle them out a little bit, stick them in the soil, make sure they're firm in there. That way, if the one doesn't make it, maybe 2 will make it, or maybe all 3 will make it, and you have a beautiful full bush that's looking good on all sides. So you can do that. Oh, there's my seeds. Anyone know what these are? Firebush. This is the firebush seeds. Have you ever germinated them from seed?
No, but I've eaten them.
You eating them? Okay. Didn't know that. I'm gonna try to germinate them from seed. So that's why I have these, but I do have a firebush cutting. And you can see this has a wimpy top. I cut this right before 5 o'clock and it wimped down on me. So I'm going to take the wimpiness out, and you'll see that leaf formation is either alternate, leaf, drop down, leaf, drop down, leaf. This is called whorled. It has 3 coming out from the same node. So this is whorled leaves. And then there's opposite leaves that have one coming out at the same point, one on one side of the bush and one on the other side. So with whorled, you want to make sure that you want to make sure that you don't have any big ones at the bottom. You can leave these on top. And you want to make sure at least one node is in the ground. And just stick that in like that.
What is that, Barbara?
That's the firebush. It's kind of stretching because it's in a shady area, and it was really, really, really damaged by the storm. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of soil are you using?
This is just a basic organic potting soil. The cheap, I don't buy Miracle Grow because it's too expensive and it's not that big of a benefit. And when you're doing cuttings and seedlings, they don't need that amount of fertilizer yet. As a matter of fact, being natives, they don't even need it at all. So I don't buy that stuff.
On that firebush, you probably cut off some of the leaf.
You can reduce them if don't cut it all off, but you can bring it down so that it'll still serve a purpose of absorbing water, but it's not going to have to get water to that whole big leaf.
Did they cry when you tell them?
She can't hear you, she won't hear her crying.
Did they
Oh.
cry?
They probably cried earlier. Okay, this is the climbing aster. Climbing asters are one of those, they're considered a vine, but they don't twirl up the tree. They don't put out the little feet and anchor in. They don't put out the little suction cups like a grape does and holds on. They don't have any of that twirly stuff. So they sort of lay around. So I suggest if you're doing climbing aster, tie it up to your tree and then let it grow and dangle, but it's not going to fall over because they do tend to fall over. But these are beautiful and one of the few plants that bloom in late fall, early winter. So you'll get the lavender daisy-like flowers all along this thing. And then the butterflies will come see you. So we want to take the wimp out. And then we want to do about 4-inch cuttings. So I'm going to make my cuttings first. Now, if you do it like this, keep the top up, or know how to tell the difference. It's easy on some plants, like on this plant, you have a leaf that you can tell the leaf is coming like this. Some of them aren't that easy to do. And you don't want to leave a tip on the top either. Now, I'm going to take these bigger leaves off. And I'm just going to stick these in as 3-in-1. Uh-oh. This is the top. I had to look for that one. Because if you put it in upside down, it's not going to root because they have a polaris, so they have a top and a bottom. Some plants it don't matter, but generally that's not the ones you're working with. Okay, this is a sea grape. If you're on the water, you can grow sea grapes here. They do produce a edible fruit. It doesn't taste very good, but the birds love it and the wildlife loves it. So, again, cut below a node. It's not really wimpy, so we're going to go 2 cuttings on this.
Barbara, can you grow them on a lake, or does it have to be on the Gulf?
No, if it's a lake that you're not going to freeze on. If you freeze, don't even try these. And I'm just going to leave 1 leaf on this one. And then on this one, I'm actually going to Well, try to remove the leaves. They usually snap off. And then you just reduce this one's leaf. And stick it in and firm it up. So that's how you do cuttings. Now, some plants do really, really well. Some plants you can trim them, and if it's a rainy season, you're going to pick them up in the ground in 3 or 4 weeks, and they're going to have roots on them. So there are plants that root a lot quicker. Some root a little long, take a little longer. So I would do trial and error. Whatever you have, try to do cuttings. It's an easy way. Now the secret to cuttings: highlight, no direct sunlight, in a sort of a shaded area, and you have to keep them wet. You don't want the soil sopping, but you don't want the plants to dry out either. And the worst part about this, squirrels. They come in looking for nuts and they think they're in these trays. And what I like about this tray, when it comes time to transplanting, I can just pull it up like this, pinch the cup, and take the seedlings out. So if they don't all root at once, and I can see some of the roots because it has a clear part, I'll take out the ones that root and stick it back in the tray. Now this tray does not drain, so don't put this where rain is going to get to it. If you use pots that drain, you can put them right out where the rain's going to hit them. But if you put it in something that doesn't drain, don't do that. They'll drown before they root. And then another way of doing propagation is from seed. I need a helper. My hands are too dirty to pass that around. Okay. Seeds come in all different sizes, so take this. And I've labeled them and glued them on there so you can see them. Just let them pass it around. You can see that seeds come in various sizes. And the critical thing is, if you're going to do the little ones, just do it like you're seasoning a steak. Just fill your tray with soil, tray like this. Fill it with soil. If you want to do the whole tray, the same plant, that's the easiest. And you just put in one tag, but you make sure you put in a tag. Where'd it go? And label it. You can use the impermanent marker that I had up here. Here they are. You can use the one I only use is a Sharpie. It's the only one that seems to last a long time, but they can fade. The best thing is to go get a grease pencil. Grease pencils are wonderful pencils. It's waxy. It stays on here forever. And the only thing better than the grease pen, that's not as good as a grease pencil, but better than the marker, is a pencil, a number 2 pencil. It does not fade off your signs, your little tags, but you tag it. So, if the seed is big, where my seeds go? All right. Where'd you go? Well, I thought I had some.
That's your medicine.
Okay, if your seeds are big, like the Cherokee bean that's on there, you can get these little peat things from Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, wherever. They come really tight. They're in a little wrapped fibers thing, and there's a hole in the middle already. All you gotta do is stick the seed in there after you scarify. Some seeds need to be scarified. Scarification means the seed has to go through a process before it will germinate. Sometimes it's fire. You ever see a wildflower area after a controlled burn? And in 3 months, it's nothing but beautiful flowers. They were scarified by the fire. Some needs cold. If you ever tried to germinate a magnolia bush, a magnolia tree, it needs to, you gotta get the outside orange stuff off or red stuff off, dry it out, put it in a paper bag, put it in the refrigerator for about 3 months before you try to germinate them. Others, like the Cherokee bean, you may need to take a pair of pliers to them and nip the end of it. You may need to soak them overnight, like morning glories. So seeding is not as easy as people say it is. You sort of have to know your seeds. You can always put them out, and if they don't germinate, you should have scarified. Take them right back out and scarify them. Yes, ma'am?
How about cootie?
Cootie, you have to get the outer shell off. They do not have to be refrigerated. If you lay them around the yard, the squirrels will plant them for you.
Yep.
You just have to find them when they come up.
Is there a source to find out how you scarify?
I'm sure there's stuff online. I haven't looked it up. I do have a book of germinating native seeds, but it's for North America, so there's not a lot of them in there that grow down here. Yes, Gal?
Florida Wildflower Foundation has a page on starting seeds.
There you go.
I'll see if I have some back here.
So that'll help. When you're doing your seeds, whatever kind you use, these are Coreopsis. I thought I had black-eyed Susans. Lardia.
When they come in those packets.
Here's the black-eyed
Do
Susans.
you have to do stuff to them, or can you just plant them
What?
when they come in those packets?
Generally, you just plant them. Now, the secret to the wildflowers is pretend you're nature. So if they dry on the bush in the fall, and they come up in the spring, you get them off your bush, you plant them in your soil in the fall, and let them come up in the spring. If they go to seed in the spring and they lose their seed, they'll wait a whole season to come up, or it might be one of them that repeats and goes into the summertime. So if they dry out on the bush, that's when you put your seeds in your trays. Don't think you know more than the plant, because I just try to duplicate nature. Sometimes getting in a seed package is a little hard, and then there's a package in the package. Nope, there's not. There's instructions. If you get these from county, they pass these out a lot. You found some? Okay. The thing for wildflowers back there, make sure you get one, Sandy. It gives you your instructions. This is Rebecca. Choose a sunny, well-drained location in the fall to early spring. Flowers will develop in the warmer temperatures 10 to 14 weeks after you plant them. Should persist and have flowers throughout the summer. Rebecca is drought tolerant and short-lived perennial. Propagation. Sow the seeds in the ground 2 weeks before the last expected frost, or get them started inside 6 to 8 weeks before you want to put them outside. The seeds need light to germinate, so just press them down into the soil surface. Do not bury them. So what you want to do is spread them out on your surface. I don't push any seed that is not a 1/4 inch long or 1/4 inch thick in the soil. I just put them on top. So you want to just sprinkle them on top. Well, these are tiny. That's on the poster. It's a long little black seed. Just make sure they make contact with soil. Then, has anyone ever heard of damp off? When you put seedlings in and you go out and they're growing and they're getting big and they're getting beautiful and they're growing and growing and growing, and then one day you go out and they're all falling over?
Yes.
It's a disease called damp off. Our soils are not perfectly sterile, and that's a disease that comes in with non-sterile soil. So what you want to do is put your seed down, then take vermiculite. This is Gail brought this in so you can see the bag. Okay? And what you want to do is sprinkle a light coating over the top of your seed. This is a sterile product, and now the seed can germinate. It's still going to get enough light to germinate, but that soil, where it's going to come up through the soil, is sterile now, so you won't get damp off. Because it's frustrating. I do a whole tray of plants, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to put them up in the 4-inch pots. And then I go out there, and most of them are laying over, and then the whole tray's diseased. You have to just dump it out. So buying the vermiculite, I think it's like $9.95 a bag, or $9.99 or something. But you use so little.
That's become.
So you use so little. So just get a little of that and cover up any of your seed. Now your bigger seeds, you don't have to do that. You just push that Cherokee bean down into the soil and pinch the soil closed. So the critical part of seeding is making sure they stay watered. I use this where I'm at in the inside or on my patio or porch. And I use this because it has a fine spray. You don't want to keep the soil sopping wet. You do want the soil to stay wet, but you don't want to be able to squeeze the soil and water come out. So you just keep spraying those seedlings. If you do them in the summertime, if you're doing summer seeding, you're gonna have to spray water a little more often. It doesn't matter if they wilt a little bit in between watering, that's fine. You don't want them laying on the tray. They'll come back up, but every time they bend over like that, they're doing damage to that tissue that's going to be their stock. So you don't want them to dry out all the way, so you want to make sure that watering is critical. And the only other thing I want to talk about is if you have vines, I think, Carol, is she here?
Yeah.
Didn't you ask me about the coral honeysuckle? Okay, the easiest way to propagate coral honeysuckle, because they're kind of a wimpy stem anyway, and you're taken away from the plant. But a lot of times you'll find runners on the ground that have come out from the side, or one that you can take off of whatever it's climbing on, lay it on the soil. What you're gonna do is take the whole vine down, not the whole plant, the whole piece of the vine, and you're going to clear an area in the soil. On the bottom side, you're gonna take a knife or something, and you're gonna scrape just the bottom, below a node. And you're going to put that into that little hole you made. You're gonna make it a little shallow hole, and then you're gonna pin it down. You can put a rock on it. I use these are turf pins, or ground cover pins, and it's just a little metal, little hoop, and you just push that down. That keeps that vine in contact with the soil. And then you're keeping a little piece at the end, just a little 3-inch piece at the end. Once that starts growing up, you have roots. Cut it off behind where you pinned it, plant it. But dig it up with a trowel or a scoop. Don't just pull it up out of the ground. But you can do a lot of vines that way. So that'd be the easiest way for you to do that. Okay? Any questions about propagation? Yes, ma'am.
We came in a little bit late, but you didn't mention anything about that hormone powder.
Yeah, I did mention that when we did the cutting part.
Okay.
You can use it. I don't use it. I've always done trays and trays and trays of cuttings. I've probably done 1 million cuttings in my lifetime, and I never used a hormone. I usually get about 70% of my cuttings. But I also had it in a mist system where the timer did the watering. I didn't have to do it. So if you can, I don't have a timer at the moment, so it's Ho's thing. So I try to do it before I go to work. So I'll go out 15 minutes early if I've got cuttings or seedlings out. I'll go out early before I go to work and do them so that they have moisture going into the day. Now you do not want to water your plants at night. You don't want they're not drying out, but you don't want them having water on the leaves because you're inviting diseases in. So you don't want to water, especially your flowering pots or whatever, don't water those things at night. Always water in the morning between 7 and 10. That's the best time to water anything. So then you're avoiding a lot of the other problems you can get. Any other questions?
I actually have one more. The vermiculite you have, is that brown? Is that
It's
brown?
kind of a goldy. Look, you can come up and look at it.
Is it can you use the white stuff too? Is that?
That's perlite. When we were in the nursery, we had to mix perlite and vermiculite into the soil. Vermiculite also helps you maintain water if it's inside the soil. Perlite gives you the porous areas in your potting soil so that the roots can get that oxygen exchange. So that's the reason for perlite. You don't have to have it. And if you're doing plants you're doing cuttings that normally grow in a sandhill, mix that sugar sand in with your potting soil when you're doing your cuttings, or even when you're transplanting your seedlings. Because they're gonna go from this to that nasty sand out there that has no nutrients whatsoever. And they're not gonna wanna come out of this peat area.
Yeah.
So you wanna kind of mix it up and give them a little bit of what they're gonna have later.
Okay.
Questions? Did everybody learn something?
Yep.
Good, good.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.